Donald Trump insists an agreement with Iran is about to be signed. Iran says no final decision has been made just yet. Is a deal close this time? And would it hold? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zeidan. Once again, the US president says a deal to end the Iran war is imminent. Donald Trump announced that a memorandum of understanding may be signed as early as this weekend in Europe. It's a shift after threatening more military strikes against Iran just hours earlier. The conflict had been intensifying for several days despite the ceasefire. Trump had threatened to hit Iran very hard and even seize its oil. Tehran downplayed Trump's announcement. It says large parts of the deal have been finalised, but no final decision has been made yet. We'll talk to our guests about the chances of reaching an agreement to end the conflict. But first, this report from Foad.
It was the largest exchange of fire between the US and Iran since the ceasefire began in early April. Early on Wednesday, US forces carried out a wave of strikes on Iran. It came after Washington accused Iran of downing one of its helicopters in the Gulf. In response, Iran targeted US bases in Bahrain, Kuwait and Jordan. But after threatening to hit Iran very hard on Thursday, US President Donald Trump reversed course on further strikes, saying an agreement had been reached with Iran.
We just made a great settlement of the war with Iran, and we're going to be subject to finalization of documents, which should get done over the next few days. We'll probably have a signing maybe in Europe.
The president says Iran has agreed to never seek a nuclear weapon and to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman says large parts of the agreement have been finalized, but that the leadership has not yet reached a final decision. He says Tehran will not compromise its red lines.
In the past few days, they again tried to impose a series of unreasonable demands and requests. The Islamic Republic of Iran has certainly shown both in diplomacy and on the battlefield that it will in no way surrender to the illegitimate conditions and demands of the other side.
If agreed, the deal would pave the way for separate talks on Iran's nuclear program. Iran also wants an end to Israeli strikes on Lebanon to be part of a broader deal. Israel has kept up attacks despite a ceasefire deal with the Lebanese government. Hezbollah has also carried out strikes on Israel. Still, the announcement by President Donald Trump that a deal could be signed by this weekend has renewed hopes that the conflict, which began in February, could soon be over. Foad, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Let's bring our guests into the discussion. Joining here in Doha is Dania Thafer. She's Executive Director at the Gulf International Forum. Foad Izadi is Associate Professor at the University of Tehran, and he joins us from the Iranian capital. And we're delighted to have Barbara Slavin. She's a Distinguished Fellow at the Stimson Center, joins us from Washington, D.C. A warm welcome to you all. If I could start with Barbara. So, we've had a few, if I can call them, false alarms before. Is it real, for real this time? Is an agreement finally coming together?
I think we'll know when the Iranians say it's real, because as we know, Donald Trump has said we are close to an agreement. I've lost count how many times he's said that it's a done deal. And, now he seems, he's talking about signing ceremonies and whatnot, but I'll wait till Tehran confirms, and then we'll know there is an agreement.
So wait till we hear it from Tehran. Foad, in Tehran, on Thursday, Donald Trump said discussions with the Islamic Republic of Iran have been brought to the highest level of Iranian leadership and approved. Have they? Because the signals coming out on Thursday from Tehran didn't sound like they were there yet.
What we hear in Tehran is that we are very close maybe 97, 98% of what needs to be done has been done already. But there is one problem. We have this elephant in the room. He's Netanyahu. And we had this CNN story today saying that he's trying to make sure that the frozen Iranian assets are not included in the agreement. So there could be this last-minute sabotage efforts by Israelis.
There's still a chance for everything to go wrong, I think, is what you're saying, Foad.
It is, Iran is interested in an agreement. I think Trump is interested in an agreement. I'm not sure if everybody in the White House is interested in the agreement because some of them are closer to Netanyahu than Trump. And I don't think Netanyahu is interested in an agreement. And this makes things complicated. If we had just Trump and Iranians, I think we would have an agreement on Sunday. But we have other people roaming around.
Okay, Dania, maybe it's a good
Can
point
I just,
to take.
Interject something?
Oh, go ahead, Barbara.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Yeah. Foad made me recall something said by a man named Bruce Rydell, who was a longtime U.S. official dealing with Iran and the Middle East. And he always said that he recalled that when Charles was Prince Charles and was married to Diana, Diana said there was always a third person in the marriage who was Camilla, now Queen of England. And he said that for the U.S. and Iran, Israel was the Camilla. So I just thought I'd put that in there.
All right. Maybe it's a good point, Dania, to take a step back at this complicated marriage, as Barbara was likening it to, and look at what's happened in just the last, 48 hours, 72 hours. We've gone through quite a significant shift in messaging from the US president from within 5 hours and 6 minutes. I actually looked it up on the social media post timings, from threatening to hit Iran very hard that very night, Thursday, even talking about taking Kharg Island, seizing Iran's oil, to then a few hours later posting about how the deal will be signed, the timing and place of the signing of the deal will be announced shortly. How do we explain such a dramatic shift?
Well, this seems like Trump's style for negotiation. I think, one, he's been doing it in the open. Two, he wanted to frame this so-called MOU that should be coming out soon as a success based on U.S. threats. And this is how he's trying to negotiate in the public. I don't think it's really a pragmatic way forward, because I think it causes hesitation on the other side. The Iranians still haven't approved the deal. They said they're still waiting for the leadership. So it's quite unclear what's going to happen, although it does sound there is movement to a deal. And even the Qataris have shown a positive indication or a nod that a deal will be.
It sounds like you're saying that perhaps some of the tough talk, the escalation that we've been seeing in US strikes on Iran the last few days was really designed to show the US president in a moment of strength making a peace deal or making some kind of MOU with Iran, rather than looking like he'd just given up and made one after things had dragged out.
Well, if you looked at the back and forth strikes between the US and Iran a couple of days leading up to the announcement of this MOU, you'll see that the targets were not really heavy-hitting targets. Iran has struck bases in some of the Gulf states. The US has struck a couple of other areas. So it was shown, they were trying to show strength on both sides, but they were not necessarily trying to reinstate a full-fledged war. I think they were trying to break the stalemate about the deal or no deal. I think that everyone is posturing for their own audience and showing strength from their perspective based on what they're releasing, the type of statements that they're saying on both sides.
Foad, in Iran, how is this likely to be seen within Iran? Along those lines of that this is a deal also made in a moment of strength by Iran. What is the messaging from the Iranian leadership, if there is, on how much of a movement there has been, last-minute movement in the Iranian position? Have they given in? Are there any indications of that they've softened their position on certain demands to make this deal more possible, more likely?
It has been a very difficult journey. We had this New York Times report a couple of days ago saying that initially Iran and United States agreed on Iran suspending enrichment activities for 10 years. And then after that agreement was done on that issue, the U.S. delegation went back and said that Trump wants 20 years now. So we have had these difficulties moving goal posts all the time. This is World Cup season. If during a football game, you have one of the teams moving the goalpost, that team is going to lose. The referee is going to end the game. But we are dealing with the United States and Trump, and they have done it several times, and the talks continue. So overall, I think it has been difficult, but
it has been difficult. Any sign of movement in the Iranian position, though, from what you're hearing?
They have. They are making concessions on issues that Iran was not available to do in 2015. In fact, if you remember Jake Sullivan a few weeks ago saying that Iran was available to make these concessions before the war, and Kushner and Witkoff, according to Jake Sullivan, didn't understand what Iran was talking about because they knew there's going to be a war. The decision was made already, and the negotiations were deception operations. Right. But I think they're listening now, and Iran is making concessions. The hope that people here have is they don't move the goalpost again, because some people here are getting tired. We had 59 parliament members writing a letter to Mr. Ghalibaf, the head of parliament, and he's also the lead negotiator, and raising serious concerns about the text that was available in Iranian media today.
Okay.
So overall, this is not a done deal, and if Netanyahu is able to change things in the last minute, you may not have an agreement.
Barbara, has there been any movement or indications of movement in the U.S. position on some of those issues that were dragging this out?
Well, again, we have to see the final agreement. There have been a lot of leaks, and it's hard to know how, authoritative they are. But first of all, the MOU is not going to resolve the nuclear issue. It's going to resolve the issue of the Strait of Hormuz, and perhaps result in, if not some unfreezing of assets now, then a pledge of unfreezing of some of Iranian assets in Qatar. Then the discussion on the nuclear issue will begin. And the question of enrichment always looms large. Can Iran enrich on its own soil? Iran insists it has that right. But practically, because so much of Iran's infrastructure is still in ruins from, the strikes from a year ago, Iran will pledge not to enrich uranium for a certain period of time, whether it's 10 years or 15 years, most likely not 20 years. And then something has to be done about the highly enriched uranium that's buried under the rubble. Trump initially demanded that it be removed from Iran. Now there have been some reports that he's willing to see it down-blended on Iranian soil under the supervision of the international.
How is that likely to go down with some aspects, some parts of the MAGA movement, which has been very vocal, calling for a resumption of the war, saying, forget these talks? And if there has been movement on the US position on some of those points, like the dilution of highly enriched uranium, like a timetable for the release of Iranian assets, how is that going to be perceived domestically?
Well, it depends. I mean, the war is not popular. It's never been popular, not from the very beginning. It was never explained. It had shifting baselines. The end to the war will be popular. But there is a faction within the Republican Party that is extremely hawkish on Iran and has always been. The Lindsey Grahams, the John Boltons of this world. And they're already very upset that any kind of agreement is being discussed with Iran that would provide it with any kind of economic relief that leaves in place essentially the same regime that has been there for 47 years. These people will be unhappy, but I think most Americans will have a sigh of relief. They'll see gasoline prices go down. And Trump himself wants to move on. Sunday's his birthday. He's going to be 80. He's got this mixed martial arts extravaganza planned. We have the World Cup. We have the 250th anniversary of U.S. independence. He wants this war over. He wants to be able to declare victory, which he will do no matter what, and move on. And I think even if there is quibbling from, the Lindsey Grahams of this world, they'll fall in line.
Dania, from the perspective particularly of Gulf countries, if not third-party countries around the world, how confident are you that an MOU would lead to the full opening of the Strait of Hormuz without anything, back to how it was before, without a special mechanism, coordination with Iran, the paying of any kind of tolls for passage and so on?
Well, if you're looking on what's leaked on both sides, from the American side and the Iranian side, it seems like there's a middle arrangement. The Iranians want to maintain control, but I think from the U.S. side, they said there would be no tolls charged. So we're not sure where that's going to go. It will be open, but Iran always has that card of being able to disrupt the Strait of Hormuz. And then there's also been some reports from the Iranian side said that there's going to be a regional discussion about the Strait of Hormuz. So it's quite unclear. But I think what's clear from what's leaked from both sides that there will be full freedom of navigation within 30 days. But what are the terms of that? That is unclear. And I think this is the most important risk factor from the perspective of the Gulf states. The Strait of Hormuz issue has been a major strategic setback for the Gulf states.
All right. Foad, from the Iranian perspective, is the official position that there can be no deal, not even an MOU at this point, without Iran retaining a greater degree of control over the Strait of Hormuz, a releasing of Iranian assets to some degree, and some kind of sanctions relief on the oil?
I agree with Sister Dania. The Strait of Hormuz is something that Iran can always close. And this is what makes 2026 different from 2015 when we had the nuclear agreement. Trump left that agreement in 2018 without paying any price. This time, if the terms that they agree upon, whether it's Strait of Hormuz management or unfreezing of assets or sanctions relief, if these things that are supposed to benefit Iran, if they are not doing their part, then Iran has access to a Strait of Hormuz. This is how God created Earth. And Iran will use that leverage to make sure that those points are addressed and Iran gets what Iran is supposed to get under the agreement. And I think this is how the Iranian leaders will justify this agreement, because we need to remember that the United States killed Iran's leader 3 months ago. They have killed more than 3,500 civilians, huge infrastructure damage. Iran has paid a very heavy cost, and the way out of this
even
situation
so, I mean,
is for Iran to do what we said.
Of course, the United Nations Secretary General termed the Israeli and US attacks, he framed them as something that runs contrary to the UN Charter, problematic, obviously, with international law. I know that Iran hasn't signed the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas, but many of the countries around the world in the region have, and they regard the right of passage, which is one of the articles 38 and 44 that talks about the right of transit passage through international straits. Does Iran here have to really weigh up not only the domestic public opinion, but also its relationships with other countries in the Gulf and the world who won't want to see that Iranian control of the Strait of Hormuz start to impede traffic and turn into tolls and so on and so forth? Even if they haven't signed the United Nations Convention on all the seas, you've got to work with the rest of the world, right?
True. And, the Strait of Hormuz was open very much before the start of the war. And Iran is not interested in closing the Strait of Hormuz. The richer Iran's neighbors get, the better it's going to be for Iran.
Okay.
And the richer world gets, it's going to be better for Iran. As part of this agreement, we have one article talking about a $300 billion investment fund for Iran. So Iran initially wanted to get compensation for all these damages. And one way the negotiators found was not to call it compensation, and they came up with this idea of this reconstruction fund.
Okay.
So either Iran gets that, which is fine, and if Iran doesn't get that, then Iranians would say, why would we be following an agreement?
Why did we make a deal?
That is only followed by us and at the other side.
All right. I think Dania wanted to come in before I take it back to Barbara, but briefly, Dania, so we give time for Barbara to have a comment.
Well, I think he alluded to what I wanted to say. And what I wanted to say is I know I have a big feeling that Iran is going to try to use the Strait of Hormuz as a leverage to hijack the Gulf states to pay for their reconstruction. But, what's interesting is that the Gulf states are suing Iran for reparations for the damages that occurred during the war. So I think it's going to be quite interesting to watch and see where that goes.
A lot of claims for reparations to go around. Barbara, what about the US naval blockade? Are we looking at a situation in which it would be lifted at this stage with the signing of an MOU? Because you might remember on June the 8th, Donald Trump posted saying the blockade will remain in place and in full force and effect until a final deal is reached. And then June 11th, he said it'll remain in effect until the transaction, referring to the MOU transaction, is finalized. Which one is it?
I guess it depends on his mood. But no, we have the 30-day period in which it reopens to all traffic, all legitimate traffic. So there will be a process. I assume the U.S. will watch to see what Iran does. If Iran stops interfering with shipping, then the U.S. will as well. But I was thinking, as Foad was talking about previous negotiations under the Biden administration, when the Iranian negotiators kept asking for what they called objective guarantees that any new agreement would remain, even if the administration changed in the United States, they wouldn't go through what they went through in 2018. And it strikes me now that the Strait of Hormuz is providing the objective guarantees that Iran was seeking at the time. But of course, they didn't envision using that geographic power, and now they have.
Barbara, looking at it, though, the way this is ending, it is not, or the way it looks like it might be ending, you have to be careful, but it doesn't look like it's ending anything along the lines of what Donald Trump vowed he would achieve on March the 6th when he called on Truth Social for unconditional surrender. And so that would be the only deal, right? He said there will be no deal with Iran except unconditional surrender. In all cases, it doesn't look like that is the ending to this.
No, indeed. And to use another soccer analogy that many people have been using, this is the biggest own goal. This war is the biggest own goal that Donald Trump has scored during his second term. The results are largely negative. for the international economy, for everyone, including Iran, I would say, which has suffered grievously, certainly for the GCC states, for poor nations that have seen oil prices rise and fertilizer prices rise. So, no, it will not be a victory in any real sense. But, the world will sigh with relief, assuming we can move on from this. I think the larger question is, for 47 years, the United States and Iran have been adversaries. And now we've gone to war twice in the space of a year. How does that get resolved? Is there ever going to be
that is a good question. Let's kind of take it to Tehran and Foad. Would an MOU even hold long enough to get to the next round of talks to produce an agreement to cover all the other tricky issues, some of which Barbara mentioned earlier, highly enriched uranium? Supposedly, if you listen to the Israeli Prime Minister, it'll also tackle Iran's missiles, its alliances, with all of the variable and question, of course, about what happens in Lebanon, assuming that the ceasefire holds there.
I think Lebanon is going to be quite difficult because whenever Netanyahu wants to sabotage this agreement, he could start bombing Beirut. He has this election in October. Likud party announced that he is going to be the Likud candidate. And if we don't have some sort of a war until October, he may go to jail because of the crimes that he committed in Israel. So he's not interested in an agreement, and he has his own leverage in order to sabotage whatever agreement we have. So your question is very valid. 60 days is quite long for people who want to sabotage an agreement. I think we should have a consensus internationally for all the people who have suffered from this war to stop Netanyahu, because it was his pipe dream of changing Iran's government, and he started this mess with the help of Trump.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. So let's thank all of our guests for joining us. Foad Izadi, an associate professor at the University of Tehran, joining us from the Iranian capital. Barbara Slavin, distinguished fellow at the Stimson Center, joining us from Washington, D.C. And of course, here in the studio in Doha, Dania, Thafer, executive director at the Gulf International Forum. Thank you all. And thank you too for watching. You can see the show again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, head over to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. For now, that's it from me, Sami Zeidan, and the whole team here. Al Jazeera's coverage continues in a moment. Stay tuned.